There's a very specific kind of silence inside an empty mall. No music, no food court chatter, just fluorescent lights buzzing over storefronts that have been closed for years, sometimes decades, the escalators frozen mid-step, and the fountains bone dry. These buildings used to be the center of American life on a Saturday afternoon, the place where an entire generation had their first job, their first date, their first pretzel from a food court kiosk. Now a lot of them are just sitting there, half-lit and mostly forgotten, waiting for a wrecking ball or a miracle, whichever shows up first. So today, we're counting down 10 famous American malls that are slowly being abandoned. Number 10, Bannister Mall, Kansas City, Missouri. Bannister Mall opened in August 1980 in South Kansas City, and for a while, it was the place to be. 4 anchor stores, Macy's, JCPenney, the Jones Store, and Sears, plus 180 shops at its peak, and a fun factory arcade that every kid in the area seemed to remember decades later. It drew shoppers from across South Kansas City, suburban Jackson County, and even neighboring Johnson County, Kansas. And for the first decade or so, it genuinely earned its reputation as a regional destination. By the mid-1990s, though, newer developments started popping up further south and across the state line, and a persistent reputation for crime in the surrounding neighborhood didn't help matters either. Bannister simply couldn't compete anymore. JCPenney left in 2000. Dillard's, which had taken over the old Macy's space back in 1986, followed in 2002. The Jones Store left in early 2005, and by the time Sears closed in 2006, the mall had no anchors left at all. It shut down completely in May 2007. Only 50 of its original 180 stores still open at the end, and was demolished in 2009. Here's where it gets almost funny, in a bleak sort of way. A proposed Major League Soccer stadium for the Kansas City Wizards was floated for the site and then quietly moved to Kansas instead. Then Cerner Corporation, the healthcare technology company, announced in 2013 that it would build a massive office campus on the site, promising up to 16,000 jobs within a decade, backed by a $4.4 billion investment that Missouri's governor called the largest economic development project in the state's history. Cerner actually delivered for a while, breaking ground on its innovations campus in 2014. Then, in 2022, Oracle bought Cerner for $28 billion, shut down 2 of the company's 3 major campuses nationwide, and by 2024, reports described unused building pads and paved roads growing over with weeds at the Kansas City site. Instead of 16,000 jobs, Oracle Health listed around 6,400 positions there. So the mall died, got replaced by a symbol of Kansas City's economic future, and that symbol has since started quietly shrinking too. Number 9. Cloverleaf Mall, Chesterfield, Virginia. Cloverleaf opened in August 1972 just outside Richmond, anchored by JCPenney and Sears, and for its first couple of decades it was a genuine community hub, the kind of place where entire families spent Saturday afternoons. Then, Chesterfield Town Center opened 5 miles to the west, newer, safer, and better positioned to catch the county's westward residential growth. And Cloverleaf started bleeding customers almost immediately. JCPenney left in 2000. Sears and the store that had replaced Thalheimer's both left by 2003. The movie theater closed in 2001. Local reporting at the time also pointed to the mall's own layout as part of the problem, with an awkward entrance off Chippenham Parkway that forced drivers to cut across 3 lanes of traffic just to turn in, and roughly 200 acres of undeveloped land behind the property that its original designers never connected to the retail in front. By 2004, the mall had essentially emptied out, and Chesterfield County finished purchasing the property in 2008. There was actually a brief moment where a local church tried to buy the dying mall and turn it into a house of worship with a 5,000-seat sanctuary in one of the old anchor spaces, which is either a beautiful redemption story or a slightly odd one, depending on your taste. The county turned that plan down and demolished the building instead in 2011. Replacing it with a mixed-use development called Stonebridge, anchored by the first Kroger marketplace in Virginia. County officials actually held a small ceremony where board members took turns swinging a sledgehammer at the old mall's marquee before the real demolition crews got involved, which feels like exactly the kind of theater a dying mall deserves. A Facebook group called So Long, Cloverleaf Mall popped up around the same time, filled with old photos of the food court and the Sears, where more than a few Chesterfield County residents apparently had their very first job. Number 8. Owings Mills Mall, Owings Mills, Maryland. Owings Mills Mall opened in July 1986 outside Baltimore as an upscale destination developed by the well-regarded Rouse Company and originally called Owings Mills Fashion Mall. It launched with 95% of its space leased, anchors including Saks Fifth Avenue and Bamberger's, and direct access from the nearby metro station that was supposed to make it one of the most accessible malls in the region. For a few years, this was genuinely one of the nicer malls in the Baltimore area, the kind of place that pulled shoppers away from downtown rather than the other way around. Then, a 1992 murder near the metro station damaged the mall's reputation for safety in a way it never really recovered from, and public perception of the transit connection soured even as the county added more bus routes trying to fix it. Saks left in 1996. A 1998 renovation brought in Sears and Lord & Taylor to try to plug the gap, but neither addition stuck around for long. And meanwhile, nearby Towson Town Center kept expanding and pulling shoppers away with a new Nordstrom and continued investment from its owner, who eventually bought Towson outright in 1998 and focused resources there instead. Macy's took over the old Hecht space in 2006, and Boscov's briefly moved into the vacated Macy's spot, but Boscov's filed for bankruptcy in 2008 and closed its Owings Mills location within 2 years, leaving just Macy's and JCPenney holding the whole building up. The mall's interior closed in September 2015, and JCPenney, the last holdout, shut its doors the following April. Demolition ran through the back half of 2016 into early 2017, and the site reopened in 2019 as Mill Station, an open-air shopping center that looks almost nothing like what stood there before, part of a broader wave of redevelopment in Owings Mills that also includes the nearby Foundry Row Retail Center. Number 7. Forest Fair Mall, Cincinnati, Ohio. Forest Fair Mall might be the most stubborn mall on this list, in the sense that it refused to just quietly die, and instead kept getting renamed and relaunched for over 3 decades. It opened in phases in 1988 and 1989 as the second largest mall in Ohio, built by developer L.J. Hooker at a cost that ballooned from an estimated $200 million to more than $250 million, split between a value-oriented East Wing anchored by a Biggs hypermarket and a more upscale fashion wing that opened later and struggled to lease space from the start. That debt load helped sink Hooker into bankruptcy just months after the mall opened, and by 1991, occupancy had dropped to 56%, with lenders taking over operations directly. What followed was one rebrand after another. In 1992, it became The Malls at Forest Fair, split into 4 themed zones covering entertainment, fashion, lifestyle, and value, complete with a restaurant and bar district built into a former Bonwit teller space. In 2002, the Mills Corporation, a firm known nationally for successful outlet-style shopping centers, bought the property and poured $70 million into a renovation that reopened in 2004 as Cincinnati Mills to genuinely large crowds and a lot of local optimism. That didn't stick either, and by 2009, the Mills Corporation, which had by then been absorbed into Simon Property Group, had sold the mall off yet again. It became Cincinnati Mall in 2009, then Forest Fair Village in 2013, and none of the new names changed the fundamental problem, which was that shoppers had stopped coming and never really came back. By 2020, inspectors found busted pipes, sealed emergency exits, and a decaying parking structure still technically open to the public. The mall's last tenant, an arcade called Arcade Legacy, closed in August 2022, and the whole complex was fully demolished between September 2025 and March 2026, ending a run that included at least 5 different names for essentially the same failing building. Number 6. Century 3 Mall, West Mifflin, Pennsylvania. Century 3 Mall opened in phases starting in October 1979 on top of a 200-foot-tall, 410-acre mound of industrial slag left behind by decades of steel production. A landform locals had long called Brown's Dump, which is either a clever bit of post-industrial land reuse or a genuinely strange place to put a shopping mall. Take your pick. At its opening, It was the third largest mall in the country, spanning 63 acres and eventually housing more than 200 stores anchored by Kaufmann's, Montgomery Ward, Gimbel's, Sears, and J.C. Penney. For years, it was a genuine social hub for the South Hills area outside Pittsburgh, with longtime employees later recalling entire days spent there, shopping, eating, and watching the mall walkers make their rounds before the stores even opened, plus a name chosen specifically because the mall opened right around the start of the country's third century of independence. The decline set in gradually through the 2000s and 2010s as anchors closed one by one. Investment group Moonbeam Capital bought the property in 2013 for $10.5 million and promised a revival that never really materialized, and the company filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in 2018. In February 2019, West Mifflin officials shut the mall down entirely after its water and fire suppression systems failed, declaring it unsafe and uninhabitable. What followed was years of neglect, vandalism, a 2023 fire that drew 100 firefighters, and at one point, a teenager falling through the deteriorating roof. A Pennsylvania court finally condemned the building as a public nuisance in 2025, and demolition, which had actually started with the parking garages back in 2024, wrapped up by early 2026, leaving roughly 90 acres of cleared land now being marketed for whatever comes next. Number 5. Landmark Mall, Alexandria, Virginia. Landmark started life as an open-air shopping center back in 1965 and wasn't fully enclosed until a 1990 renovation. For years, it served the west end of Alexandria, Virginia, just outside Washington, D.C., anchored at various points by Macy's, Sears, and Hecht's. But competition from newer malls in the region chipped away at its customer base for 2 decades, and by 2017, the mall had shut down completely, though Sears somehow hung on inside its own standalone building for 3 more years before finally closing in July 2020. For a while, the abandoned Landmark Mall had a strange second life as a filming location, most notably standing in for a fictional Southfields Mall in the 2020 movie Wonder Woman 1984, complete with an 80s-themed makeover applied specifically for the shoot. It's a fittingly ironic bit of casting, considering the real mall's own interior had been genuinely stuck somewhere in the past for years by that point. After the cameras left, the building went back to sitting empty, its former Macy's briefly used as a temporary homeless shelter. Following roughly 15 years of failed redevelopment proposals dating back to 2006, including one scrapped plan for an urban town center from the Howard Hughes Corporation in 2013, the Alexandria City Council finally approved a plan in 2021 to demolish the mall and replace it with a new Innova Alexandria Hospital campus, alongside housing and retail space. Demolition began in May 2022. With Alexandria's mayor literally leading a countdown before the wrecking equipment moved in, and the roughly $2 billion hospital campus, expected to bring more than 2,000 healthcare workers to the site, along with a cancer center and a level 2 trauma center, is projected to open around 2028. Number 4. Hawthorne Plaza, Hawthorne, California. Hawthorne Plaza opened in February 1977 in the South Bay area of Los Angeles County. Built with around 130 stores across roughly 800,000 square feet, anchored by J.C. Penney, Montgomery Ward, and the Broadway. Aerospace industry job losses through the late 1980s and early 1990s hit the surrounding area hard, and competition from bigger, newer centers like the Del Amo Fashion Center pulled shoppers away. The mall was also looted and damaged during the 1992 Los Angeles riots, which didn't help matters. By 1998, only about 70 stores remained, with Macy's, which had taken over the Broadway's space, standing as the sole original tenant still open. The mall closed for good in March 1999, ending a run of just over 22 years. What makes Hawthorne Plaza genuinely unusual is what happened next. Essentially nothing for over 25 years. Except for film crews. The eerie, gutted interior became a favorite backdrop for productions, including Minority Report, the HBO series Westworld, Gone Girl, and a car chase sequence in The Fast and the Furious, Tokyo Drift. Meanwhile, the actual redevelopment saga dragged on and on. A 2006 filing proposed 1.5 million square feet of office and retail space, plus 610 residential units. An outlet mall concept surfaced in 2014. A downtown-specific plan in 2016 rebranded the site as Transformative Project T1. None of it ever broke ground, while the property's owner, the Charles Company, let the site deteriorate so badly that the city of Hawthorne sued them in November 2021 over illegal dumping, graffiti, homeless encampments, and what officials described as an unauthorized parking rental scheme running out of the mall's own lots since at least 2018. The property went up for sale in 2023 as a 20.5-acre redevelopment opportunity, and in September 2025, a court finally ordered the owners to begin redevelopment or demolition no later than August 2026, which means this particular ghost mall may finally, actually, be running out of time. Number 3. Rolling Acres Mall, Akron, Ohio. Rolling Acres opened in August 1975 as the newest and largest of Akron's 3 enclosed malls, developed by Forest City Enterprises with Sears as its original anchor, eventually adding JCPenney, Montgomery Ward, and an O'Neill's department store, along with a 3-screen movie theater. Through the 1980s and early 1990s, it was, by local newspaper accounts, the mall where all of Akron shopped, a place where kids tossed pennies into an orange-tiled fountain and blew their allowance at Claire's and Tom McCann. But competition from an expanding rival, Summit Mall, and a broader shift towards standalone big-box stores steadily wore Rolling Acres down through the 1990s. A 1994 edition of a Target store and a food court refresh did little to reverse things, and by the mid-1990s, Dillard's and JCPenney had both already been downgraded to outlet formats due to declining sales. The mall's interior finally closed in 2008 after the property owner failed to pay the electric bill, which is a genuinely rough way for a shopping mall to go out. The remaining anchor stores limped along for a few more years, Macy's closing in 2009 and Sears in 2010, before the last one, a JCPenney outlet, closed in December 2013. What followed made Rolling Acres something of a legend among urban explorers and dead mall enthusiasts online. Scrappers stripped the building of its copper wiring, vandals tore through what was left, and photographers documented the decay for years, turning the mall into one of the most widely shared symbols of what people started calling the retail apocalypse. The structure was finally demolished in stages between 2016 and 2019, and Amazon opened a fulfillment center on the site in late 2020, bringing an estimated 1,500 jobs to a stretch of Akron that had spent over a decade as a punchline. Number 2. Randall Park Mall, North Randall, Ohio. When Randall Park Mall opened on August 11, 1976, on the site of a former horse racetrack outside Cleveland, it was marketed as the largest shopping center in the world, a 2-story, 2.2 million square foot complex that reportedly cost $175 million to build. It launched with 5 anchors, including Sears, JCPenney, and local department store names like Higbee's and May Company, plus a 3-screen cinema, and at its peak employed more than 1,800 people while pulling in shoppers from across the Cleveland metro area. The decline started in the late 1990s, when JCPenney and Dillard's both left as part of company-wide downsizing in the face of big-box competition, and smaller tenants followed them out the door one after another. Rising crime in the surrounding North Randall and Warrensville Heights areas pushed shoppers toward newer, perceived as safer destinations like Beechwood Place, and by 2009, after 33 years in business, Randall Park closed completely. The building sat vacant for years, stripped and vandalized, its marble floors and once grand interior reduced to a favorite subject for urban decay photographers, documenting what a Cleveland historical write-up later summed up simply as a mall stripped down to the bare bones. In 2014, Industrial Commercial Properties began acquiring the site to convert it into an industrial park, and demolition ran from roughly 2014 through 2017, sparing only the old Sears building, which was later converted into a multi-tenant industrial facility. Amazon finalized a lease for an 855,000 square foot facility on the property in August 2017. And the fulfillment center it built now employs more than 2,600 people with an annual payroll north of $77 million, which is either an inspiring second act or a slightly depressing full-circle joke about what retail in America has become, depending on your mood that day. Number 1, Dixie Square Mall, Harvey, Illinois. Dixie Square opened in 1966 south of Chicago at a cost of about $25 million, growing to 64 stores by 1968, including a Woolworths, a Montgomery Ward, and a Jewel supermarket, drawing shoppers from across Chicago's south suburbs. Rising crime in Harvey through the early 1970s steadily drove shoppers away, and stores began closing in droves by 1978 until only about 20 tenants remained. The mall shut its doors entirely in November of that year, just 12 years after it opened, one of the fastest rises and falls of any American mall from that era. A few holdouts, including JCPenney, briefly stuck around with exterior-facing entrances, but by the summer of 1979, even those were gone. What happened next is the whole reason most people have ever heard of Dixie Square at all. In the summer of 1979, director John Landis rented the already abandoned mall for 8 weeks to film the climactic car chase in the Blues Brothers, sending the Bluesmobile crashing through storefronts, display cases, and a mall full of extras, including a memorable bit involving a stuffed toy at a fake Toys R Us storefront that was built specifically for the shoot. The production left much of the interior in genuine ruins, and rather than getting cleaned up, the mall was simply abandoned again, this time for good. Over the following 3 decades, it became one of the most photographed and written about dead malls in the country, a magnet for urban explorers, complicated repeatedly by asbestos contamination that derailed multiple redevelopment attempts, including one in 2005 that ended with a lawsuit from the Illinois Attorney General over improperly handled asbestos debris left lying around wrapped in plastic. The state finally provided $4 million in demolition funding in 2010, work started in early 2012, and what remained of Dixie Square came down that May, leaving behind an empty lot and one of the most enduring pieces of movie trivia in American retail history. Still, Dixie Square opened in 1966 south of Chicago at a cost of about $25 million. Why this keeps happening? None of this happened in a vacuum. The enclosed American mall was, for a long time, one of the most reliably profitable real estate formats in the country, and developers built hundreds of them across the second half of the 20th century, often within a few miles of each other in the same metro area, betting that population growth would eventually catch up to all that retail space. In a lot of these 10 cases, it simply didn't, or it moved somewhere else entirely, following new highways and new subdivisions further out into the suburbs, leaving the older, closer-in mall stranded next to a neighborhood that had stopped growing. Department stores, the anchors that used to be the whole reason people drove to a mall in the first place, spent decades consolidating, merging, and closing locations nationwide, and every time a Sears, or a JCPenney, or a regional chain like Higbee's or Kaufman's disappeared from one of these malls, it usually took a chunk of the smaller inline stores down with it, since those anchors were what actually pulled in the foot traffic the smaller tenants depended on. Add in the rise of online shopping over the last 15 years or so, and a lot of these malls were fighting a battle on 2 fronts at once: competition from newer physical retail and competition from retail that didn't require driving anywhere at all. Not every mall in America is in this kind of trouble. Plenty of the busier ones, especially in wealthier suburbs with growing populations, are doing just fine. But the ones on this list were usually the second or third mall built in their metro area, competing for a shrinking pool of shoppers against properties that simply had more money, better locations, or newer owners behind them. The pattern underneath it all. Look at these 10 stories side by side, and a familiar shape starts to emerge. A mall opens with huge fanfare in the 1960s, 70s, or 80s, often marketed as the biggest or fanciest thing its region has ever seen, sometimes even claiming the title of largest mall in the entire world. However briefly and however dubious that claim actually was, it thrives for a decade, maybe 2. Then a newer mall opens nearby with better parking and a more modern layout, or the surrounding neighborhood changes and crime, real or perceived, chases shoppers toward the suburbs, or a couple of anchor stores leave at the same time, and the whole thing starts to wobble in a way it never quite recovers from. Vacancies climb, foot traffic drops, reputation, deserved or not, takes a hit, and once that reputation turns, it's almost impossible to turn back. And within a few more years, the doors close for good, sometimes followed immediately by demolition, and sometimes followed by a decade or more of sitting there, half-lit and empty, before anyone gets around to tearing it down. What replaces these malls tends to follow its own pattern too. Amazon warehouses at Rolling Acres and Randall Park, Following a template that's played out at more than a few other dead Ohio malls over the past decade, hospitals and mixed-use developments at Landmark, grocery-anchored strip centers at Cloverleaf and Owings Mills, corporate campuses that promise thousands of jobs at Bannister Mall, some of which actually show up, at least for a while. It's less a story about shopping habits changing, though that's obviously part of it, and more a story about how American land keeps getting repurposed, generation after generation, whatever the current version of the future happens to look like at the time. Every one of these sites got built to serve one particular moment in American retail, and every one of them either adapted or didn't when that moment eventually passed. There's also something worth noting about the timeline here. Every single mall on this list took years, sometimes decades, to actually disappear once the decline set in. Nobody flips a switch and shuts a mall down overnight. It's death by 1,000 closed storefronts, one anchor at a time, one lawsuit at a time, one failed redevelopment proposal at a time, until eventually the building becomes more valuable as cleared land than as a functioning shopping center. That's really what slowly being abandoned means in practice. Not a dramatic collapse, but a long, quiet erosion that most of us only notice in hindsight, usually after we've already stopped going. If you enjoyed this tour through America's dying and dead shopping malls, do us a favor and hit that like button and subscribe if you want more videos digging into the strange afterlives of the places that used to define American suburbs, from abandoned amusement parks to entire ghost towns built around industries that don't exist anymore. Let us know in the comments if there's a dead or dying mall near you that deserves its own spot on a list like this, and tell us which one of these 10 surprised you the most. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.